In the case of Nixon versus United States, President Nixon is guilty of recording conversations during his meetings. He has been convicted of these crimes and has claimed that he is immune to the conviction because of his executive privilege. The courts debated whether it is the president's right to safeguard certain information using his executive privilege, confidentiality power, and is entirely immune from judicial review.
A campaign was held in November 1972 as Richard Nixon won a second term as president, defeating the Democratic candidate George McGovern. Shortly after Nixon's election on June 17th, 5 burglars were caught at the Democratic Party campaign headquarters in Washington's Watergate complex.
A plan was approved to bug and steal information from the Democratic National Committee headquarters at the Watergate Hotel. On June 17, 1972, during the second of these break-ins, the burglars were arrested.
The burglars were caught with burglary tools, 3 pen-sized gas guns, as well as camera and films.
The burglars were caught repairing wiretapping equipment on office phones and taking pictures of documentation.
It was later revealed that the 5 burglars were Bernard Barker, Virgilio Gonzalez, Eugenio Martinez, Frank Stargis, and James W. McCord. James W. McCord was a security coordinator for the Republican National Committee and the Committee for the Re-election of the President. McCord was also a former FBI and CIA agent. He was dismissed from his RNC and CREEP positions the day after the break-in. Eugenio R. Martinez worked for Barker's Miami real estate firm. He had CIA connections and was an anti-Castro Cuban exile. Bernard L. Barker, a realtor from Miami, Florida, former Central Intelligence Agency operative. Barker was said to have been involved in the Bay of Pigs incident in 1962. Franker A. Sturgis, another associate of Barker from Miami, he also had CIA connections and involvement in anti-Castro activities. Virgilio R. Gonzalez was a locksmith from Miami, Florida. Gonzalez was a refugee from Cuba following Castro's takeover. Howard Hunt Jr. was a former White House aide. G. Gordon Liddy was the finance counsel for the Committee of the Re-election of the President. Hunt and G. Gordon Liddy had been stationed nearby and were supervising the burglars. They were known as the Plumbers, which were the White House Special Investigation Unit. They had been established by John Ehrlichman to prevent info leaks from the White House. They were involved in activities against Democrats and anti-war protesters.
The Nixon administration denied any wrongdoing, but it was evident that they had tried to cover up the burglary and connection to President Nixon. Nixon appointed a special prosecutor. The prosecutor filed a subpoena, a written order that commands someone to appear in court to give evidence, to secure tapes that were relevant to the criminal investigation. Although President Nixon only released edited transcripts of the tape under an executive privilege, the case was brought to the Supreme Court, and the power of the judiciary stating that having executive privilege gives the president to withhold materials relevant to the criminal investigation.
Chief Justice Burger used the case Marbury v. Madison to dispute that no person, not even the President of U.S., is above the law. On August 5, 1974, transcripts of 64 tape recordings were released. 3 days later, Nixon announced that he no longer has a strong political base, that he decided to resign.
From the discussions I have had with congressional and other leaders, I have concluded that because of the Watergate matter, I might not have the support of the Congress that I would consider necessary to back the very difficult decisions and carry out the duties of this office in the way the interests of the nation will require.
There are tape recordings of President Nixon. It is very hard to hear and interpret. Here is the original recordings from the Watergate scandal.
It's too early to say, but it would appear that given a very difficult situation, and no cooperation from justice, either FBI or Columbians. That our guys have done, and these two lawyers at the committee's have done a superb job of keeping this thing.
Well, this might
Let's tie it up.
Nixon installed the tapping system because he wanted his administration to be the best chronicled. He also wanted an accurate record of his meetings. Also, his chief of staff, H.R. Haldeman, wrote that Nixon wanted to be able to correct accidental and intentional misrepresentations of what had been said during his meetings. He also wanted to ensure that accurate translations could be used in his meetings with foreign leaders, and planned to use it to write his memoirs.
The recordings do not reveal national security information, constitute a clearly unwarranted invasion of personal privacy, or contain information involving any of 6 other restricted categories defined in the Presidential Recordings and Materials Preservation Act of 1974 regulations.
The court decided unanimously that it was unconstitutional for President Nixon to record the conversations and to keep them from being investigated. It was ruled that Nixon could not use executive privilege to exempt himself from the subpoena and must obey it. President Nixon was rightly convicted of the crimes that were stated in the Supreme Court case of Nixon versus United States because he has violated the First Amendment and thinking that he has immunity because of executive privilege.